in which television, broadly as a medium, became much, much more concerned with whether or not it was really serving the wants and needs of the mass of the audience, a far greater concern than there had ever been before about ratings. And James Burke, all his instincts were towards the things which were happening.
Last week, this happened in London.
Burke is often remembered as a broadcaster with futuristic interests, but in a key 1973 edition, he responded to the tense present. The IRA had just exploded its first bombs in London.
A man in his 60s has died and about 120 people have been injured in 2 car bomb explosions and other bomb scares. There have been 4 car bombs, 2 of which were defused, and the circumstances suggest they were all timed to go off around 3 o'clock.
A lot of people in major urban centres in Britain were very frightened of what the IRA was doing. I mean, a lot of bombing was going on, a lot of people were getting hurt, and Burke was kind of looking at the arms trade.
We do it with one of these things. It's the British Defence Equipment Catalogue. It contains all the details, except for the price, of everything we make.
I happen myself to have made a film about the children in Northern Ireland, and the contacts I made in Northern Ireland enabled us to persuade the army to fly over a Hercules and a heck of a lot of troops to White City, to the studio, which was surrounded by a ring of steel, in order just to try and tap the fear and the real reason for the fear of that time.
These soldiers are escorting weapons captured in Northern Ireland and flown over here last night on a military aircraft for this programme. Thank you. Now that is nothing compared with what they've captured. That's nothing. I'm not going to tell you about all of them. The thing we should think about is not that they're being used to kill people in Ulster, but how they got there.
I think probably consciously we milked a little bit of the technophilia, the obsession with technology, with guns being fired in the studio and what have you.
I want to show you what he did to the target.
But what I believe nobody really understood until they saw that program was just how prevalent, just how widespread arms were, predominantly for the IRA, and all the different sources from the Arab countries and what have you were coming into. The network of connections with other terrorist movements was just astonishing.
The story behind this one, sold by Russia to Egypt or Syria, got into the hands of a revolutionary group that we are told is probably Black September, and taken by fishing vessel into southern Ireland.
It was an extraordinary program. I'll never forget the atmosphere around the studio. We were genuinely afraid that something might happen. You know, even at that studio, armed troops around the studio. The adrenaline was running very high that night.
Let me give you one last thought to think about. When you last bought your kid a toy, and he went off with it, was it one of these? And why did it have to be a toy gun?
When you think about the subjects that James covered in the Burke special, it's actually quite surprising to realise that actually a lot of them are just completely relevant today. What's changed is the particular political context. If you like, then with weapons it might have been the IRA. Now you could say it's about other forms of international terrorism.
How far is it from bang bang, you're dead, to that and that, to horrifying scenes of violence in daylight in a British major city that a couple of years ago we would have thought impossible?
We don't really have today the approach to science that James Burke embodied in 1973. We haven't really got that.
I do wish he'd come back. I mean, he's much older now and seen as a sort of guru of science and computing and technology in the States where he lives now, but he'd still be able to hold an audience like that. And if you can bring Parky back, you could bring James back.
Well, that's it for tonight. We'll be back next week, I hope, in lighter vein with something else. Good night.
These days, television is filled with real people, or at least non-entities desperate to become celebrities. But in 1973, when the phrase Big Brother made people think of George Orwell rather than Nasty Nick or Chantel,